I've gone through several phases in interpreting the possible meanings of the term social distancing. I thought at first that it was a simple totalitarian doublethink in phrase, as many other people have thought. And it's simply absurd. And it was replaced in some instances by the term physical distancing. But that still raised questions for me, in that why do we even need to say that it's physical? Wouldn't people simply presume and not have to put in this redundancy? Because if we're facing a physical danger, then the distancing must be done physically. Then I started to wonder, because of some reports or claimed reports of people saying that they felt cut off from God or cut off from their own spirituality after getting their shots, that perhaps a different meaning might have been hinted at all along. Not stated outright, because people might consider it might find it too ridiculous to accept on a subconscious level. And that is the idea of spiritual distancing. I initially thought of it as a joke, the idea that we would have to keep ghosts at a distance, or if we wanted to keep those ghosts at a distance, we could simply tell them, based on the premise of movies like The Others and The Sixth Sense, that we're infected and may be afraid and stay away because they don't realize that they're dead already. But then I started thinking more that perhaps by saying the physical distancing, there's an implication that if you have to say physical, there's another kind of distancing, which is unmentioned, which is distant in its meaning. And that would be spiritual distancing, because it's the opposite of the material or physical in some respects. This has theological implications to it. If someone is trying to slip this other meaning in under the rug, then that is important, because there are certain interpretations of the Bible, Gnostic ones, based on the premise the world is created by an evil God, and the true source creator is at a distance from us, perceptually. So, in the Garden of Eden, for instance, there are two versions, or two gods. And one is more physically immediate than the other. The other one seems more distant. YHWH walks through the garden, and he tells Adam directly, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Whereas Elohim is spoken of as if he's off stage, as if we're hearing everything we know about him secondhand, at least. Because the serpent says to Eve, did Elohim tell you that you may not eat of any tree in the garden? So we don't hear Elohim say it directly. And Eve replies that not only did Elohim somehow communicate to them that they may not eat of any of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but he also told them a distancing instruction, a distancing command. That is, not to touch the tree, as well as not to eat from it. In the story of Sarah, Elohim apparently conceives Isaac by her, but from a distance, without physical contact. Whereas YHWH makes a visit to Abraham and Sarah's tent, then comes back and sees Sarah again, presumably physically. So there's a difference in how they deal with mortals. And Elohim is the one who gives the command to Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac. YHWH is the one who steps in and contradicts the command and stops the sacrifice before it can happen. In David Vose's interpretation, as I remember it from one of his videos, he said the opposite. He didn't make the actual biblical interpretation. He was saying that it was YHWH who wanted him sacrificed, who wanted Isaac sacrificed. You know, this is because there's a general contention, in the way that some Gnostics interpret the Bible, that YHWH, the present physically accessible version, or God, is the bad guy. And the distant one, Elohim, is the good guy. Even though, as I would see it, his interpretation wasn't supported by the text. Because if you say the bad guy is the one who wants Isaac sacrificed, then YHWH could not be the bad guy because he's the one who stepped in and stopped the sacrifice. There is a general connection with Gnostic principles that the material is bad and the spiritual is good. So the distant in that respect, the less sensible, physically detectable, is what is good and what must be sought after, and there's a general dislike of the material body and so on. This is different from standard Christianity in that the idea of what people will have after the resurrection, when all is set right, is that they will have what are still recognizable as physical bodies, but there will be a spiritual dimension added on to them. So one way, of course, that the lockdowns shifted or tried to shift people's religious beliefs was by not allowing them to go to church and separating them from the concept of God as somebody that you get together in physical proximity to other people in order to worship or to connect with. So there are definite winners and losers, as in every other sphere, in spiritual terms as well as material terms, or at least there may be an attempt to favor one interpretation or one version of spirituality over the other.